in the game. Mob mentality in his own lane, so better pay attention to what he be saying. Get the message, ain't no question, giving advice for any investment. Welcome to the broadcast, the Jazz Tackle Podcast.
I'm going to talk to you about a lot of different things, but I am so stoked for today's episode for a couple of reasons. Number one is because we have a live audience. And I do a program for realtors where I bring in a group of realtors right across, our city and province. It's in person. It's a 10-day event that I do, 3 hours a day. And I was just talking to them. It's called the Immersion Program, where they come in and kind of immerse themselves into my world, really into my business and my team's business. And I was talking to them yesterday. It was day one, and I bring in a guest speaker for day one, who really is an expert when it comes to the real estate market. And I was telling them, I was like, for me, as my viewers and listeners know, that I don't have anything really past a high school education, and even that I barely passed, right? I think they just wanted me out of the school, so they kind of gave me my passing grades. And so when I got into real estate, I needed to look to people to get my education and get my information so I can articulate well to my clients. And as I started looking around, there's not a lot of people that are really true experts. And now being in the business, coming up to 19 years, I rely on 3 to 4 people. The gentleman that I had come speak, he's my broker of record yesterday, Christopher Slido. My viewers and listeners have seen him on past podcasts. But you are someone, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass, brother. You are someone that I creep on socials, not because I think you're just good looking or anything of that sort, and how you do your content, but man, the amount of information that you have in that head of yours when it comes to not only Southern Ontario real estate market, which is important to my viewers and listeners, but the Canadian real estate market. I actually think you are the top, and like big kudos to your and I'm not sure if JG is a business partner and all that. We'll get into that stuff, but your organization, REIN, is hands down, and I'm part of a couple of investment groups, large investment groups. But I think what you guys do best at REIN is the amount of data that you put out there, and for possible investors, which makes up probably 75 to 80% of my viewership and listenership. When you have a lot of data, you can make better informed decisions.
100%.
And Patrick, Mr. Patrick Francie, you're the guy who kind of leads all that. So first and foremost, thank you, because you and I have been doing this, trying to get you on the podcast for a while. And I told you the last time I was on your podcast, I said, man, I don't want to do it virtual with you, man. I really, and you said, Jazz, I'll make it happen when I come. A lot of people say that. But you did. You said, I'm flying in. You're here for a day. And you came to my studio.
100%.
And I can't tell you how much that means to me. I have goosebumps. I'm not sure if the camera's going to catch it or not. It really means a lot because I learned so much from you. I'm able to now educate not only my 11,362 people in my community as investors, but other real estate agents, which is a passion. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Awesome. So happy to be here. Excited about the conversation, man.
I'm really, really pumped. So, and I want to take it everywhere, man. Like your investment group, personal stuff as well, and whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Open book, man.
I love that. A lot of people ask, like, why real estate? But my viewers and listeners, they know. They know why real estate is not necessarily the best investment in the world. That's my take on it. I'm not sure if it's the best investment in the world, but I definitely think it's one of. But what I wanted to really get from you is, how did you get into real estate? Like, what was it that was like, this is how you got in as your first investment?
Well, it's interesting. It's not that complicated. I've been a business owner for almost 40 years. 39 years I've owned a particular business in Edmonton. Still own it to this day.
What business is that again?
What's that?
What business was that?
It's a retail business called ProSkate. We're into a totally different industry, by the way. And that's a whole different side life. But anyways, I still own that business today. Haven't had a key to the store for, 15 years. Like, I don't think I can get in. No, I can't get in the store on my own. I have to phone somebody. Not that I want to. But the point is, I've owned that store many years, had 2 stores, had to make the tough call, shut one location down through COVID. And so I did that. Having said that, still own that store today. But back in the time when I was really building that business, I was really paying attention to other business owners. Entrepreneurship was my game, not real estate at all. I didn't know how to spell real estate. And I joke about it, but it's true. Is it 1 word? Is it 2 words? Do I capitalize it? Like, I really don't know. Like, that's how distant it was.
It's like pro forma for us. We always have a tough time with Laura. Laura's here. It's a 2 words, but continue.
Yeah. So that was my world. And I looked at some very successful business guys that I admired. And, regardless of how successful they were in business, I mean, some of them making multi-millions of dollars, every single one of them owned real estate. And I thought that, isn't that interesting? And one day I happened to have a conversation and somebody said to me, and I was struggling with business. And that's the next phase of that was when this guy came in to buy me lunch, business owner. He says, come on, let's go for lunch. I go, dude, I can't get out of here. There's no way. And I was frustrated, and he sat down with me, and I know it's cliche now, but it wasn't back then. And he looked right at me, and he goes, I said, I'm just too busy. I can't get out of this business. And he goes, do you know something, Patrick? The day you start working on your business and stop working in your business is the day you'll be able to go for lunch. And it was like somebody hit me between the eyes with a hammer. Like, so cliche these days, it seems like everybody knows that. But I didn't know it back then. That was 25 years ago. And so I started looking and talking with him a little bit more, and I saw that he was investing in real estate as well. And he said, you have to think about how you're going to exit your business. I said, I don't know. I've never thought about that. And he goes, well, at some point you're going to want to sell your business and or you're going to need to do something that makes sure that you have income in the future, and real estate's the way to do that. So he kind of guided me along that path. And interestingly enough, I waited another couple of years before I even looked at real estate. This was back in the late 90s.
Okay.
And then in about 1998, oh my gosh, I'm aging myself, aren't I? So anyways, 1998, I'm driving down the street. I see this open house, these condos in Edmonton, and I walk in the door and I look at these condos that they've totally rebuilt, a project by Christensen Brothers, which was a big deal back then. And I walked in, I said to the realtor, I go, how much for these condos? And they were $57,000. And I went, well, that was a lot of money.
I know.
Right back then, it was still all
You get a
relative,
spot
right?
in Toronto right now for $57,000.
Well, exactly.
$1.25, $1.30 for a parking spot today. Yeah.
But how simple was it? With no guidance. So I walk in, the realtor's holding an open house. I said, could I possibly buy these units and then rent them out? And she looked at me and she goes, yeah, but like the tax consequences of that are just stupid. Okay. And I went, oh, okay. And I walked out the door, and that was my first and last step into the conversation of real estate.
Okay.
And it shut me down. I go, okay, well, she's an expert, I guess. I don't know what I thought. I wasn't thinking, obviously. And I walked away. So then it was 2 years later, and I came across this little ad in the paper, learned about Alberta real estate, understand what's happening in this marketplace. It was an ad in a classified newspaper back then. And I went to an event, and there was a guy by the name of Tim Johnson, who was one of the original founders, who was actually the original founder of the Real Estate Investment Network.
Okay.
And he was hosting an event, and it was an introduction event. And I went to the next event that they were putting on, and he talked about real estate. And he talked about real estate in a way that was like, oh, I can understand this concept. What the hell? Why am I investing in real estate?
It down a little bit. Like,
well, he just
put in layman's terms.
It was a 90-minute presentation.
Got it.
It was part of his sales funnel into what they had was an event called ACRE, which was the Authentic Canadian Real Estate Program. Back then, they didn't call it ACRE. They called it something else, which doesn't matter because I can't remember. But ultimately, it took me to a 3-day event, 2.5-day event with the Real Estate Investment Network. And that's where I started investing in real estate. I got that weekend spent on the Real Estate Investing in Canada program, understanding the 15, well, it was only 8 steps back then. Anyways, the evolution of real estate. And that's when I started investing in real estate.
Has a lot changed from then in terms of what you're looking for when you're making an investment into real estate? Are the fundamentals the fundamentals?
Well, understand that when we talk about the fundamentals of investing in real estate, what most don't take into consideration is what we look at And that's where our brand is really built around, is the economic fundamentals.
Okay.
So it wasn't just about the how to invest in real estate, how to get a mortgage, how to decide on what property, how to do a pro forma. There was that part of it, but it was really understanding why you were investing in real estate, and then what were the economic fundamentals that was driving the region that you were interested in. In other words, we often had the conversation, and it really is a conversation we have to this day, is we want to invest in a region with an economic future, not an economic past. We want to look at where real estate is going, less of where it's been. Less, where it's been historically. I know as realtors, that's always something we're looking at, is that history. But the history really means nothing. It's good information. It's an indicator, but you still need to know where it's going. And what drives real estate is what's going on economically. And understanding what's going on economically allows you to see the future of where real estate is going. And that's the fundamental difference with buying a home and investing in real estate. If you're buying a home, you're less concerned about it. You want to, of course, grow equity, and it becomes this thing. But it's not considered an investment. You're not buying it for cash flow. You're not buying it for appreciation per se. It's a place you want to live. And is it close to mom's house?
Exactly right. And then what are the kitchen cabinets look like and all that kind of stuff. Now, you said where, when you were talking about where the market's heading in and trying to forecast, I'm thinking of Wayne Gretzky, obviously.
Yeah.
Right? He always
Where the
wanted
puck's
to go
going.
where the puck
Yeah.
is going, right? What are those metrics that you're looking for?
Well,
When you say economic factors, what are those?
so there's what we call the economic fundamentals, which are the drivers, economic drivers, and then there's the influencers. There's two parts to that equation. So when we look at the fundamentals, we know that what drives housing is an economy, and you need economic conditions that would represent gross domestic product, GDP growth. So GDP growth is the economic health of a region. How much productivity is going on, and when we see those positive GDP numbers, it represents jobs, right? And when you have positive GDP numbers and you have positive jobs, that means people are working. Good news. Then what it means is that if it's a strong job growth, then you're going to attract people coming into that region. So then you have population growth, and when you have population growth, you have rental demand. And rental demand is driven because when people move into an area, unless they're very familiar with the area, we look at Canada, you got immigration, interprovincial migration, people moving into an area, they rent. So we know that rental demand increases when there's good GDP growth, good job growth. People come into the region because they need to work, and then ultimately they rent. Historically, and by the numbers, the data supports that if you were to start at zero and all of a sudden GDP growth jumps to, let's say, 2%, 2.5%, and you say from that point, you go, okay, watch what's going to happen next. GDP means there's jobs. Jobs mean there's people going to move into the region. People moving into the region means they're going to rent. And about 18 months later, after they rent, they say, okay, I've rented enough. 18 months to 2 years, now they got a credit rating. Now they know that their job is solid. Now that they've got some money in the bank, they know where they want to work. If they're culturally, come immigrants from another country, they know where they want to live because they're going to move to where culturally they can connect with their people, speak the language, and practice all the cultures that they do.
That's why all my paisans, my Indian paisans, they moved to Brampton and Surrey.
Yeah, exactly.
Just go to those places.
100%.
Where all our people are.
Well, and that's another interesting factor as an investor. But the point is that at that point they said, okay, well, they say, let's buy a home. And then the demand for homes start to go up, and it's a simple supply-demand issue.
Now, would you say you're looking at transitory kind of areas where, from an age perspective, there's younger people because that they're going to rent at the start, and then if they start to buy, would they necessarily they might leave that area? So is that a good factor, a good metric you're looking at?
Well, this becomes who is your client, who's your tenant, what is your tenant profile? So you talk about transitory, you can actually, if you know a city well and you understand the economics that are driving that particular city, in every city there's what we would call an area in transition. Okay? It's kind of the right on the edge of rough part of town.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
But what happens as a city grows is that, generally younger couples move into those areas because it's affordable, right? Well, they don't necessarily want to, but that's what is affordable. Then the next thing you know, they set up house, they have kids, and then guess what? There's no riffraff in my backyard.
Right.
There's all of a sudden Mama Bear starts kicking all the riffraff off the street. They start cleaning up that street. Well, the next thing you know, the edge of that is moved, right? So those are areas in transition. As an investor, those are great if you know the area, but you have to understand that there's generally could be 2, 3, 5 years of transition that could be a little painful.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump kind of all over the
Sure.
place. As a younger person, because for some reason when I look at my analytics on Instagram, it's that age group from 19 to kind of 32 is my biggest kind of followers, and so they're thirsty though.
Yeah.
They're thirsty for investing into real estate. Yeah. What I like, actually, because I also have a staff that kind of is in that age group as well, they don't really care about necessarily owning their own home. They understand that maybe even owning where you live is not necessarily something that you need to do. Right? 100%. Like, we know a lot of uber wealthy people that don't necessarily own their where they live is not the property that they own. They just make sure that they invest into real estate. Mm-hmm. But what are some easy ways that you would advise that generation, that age group, to get into investing into real estate?
Well, I think there's a couple of fundamentals around it. Usually there's a challenge with cash, right? And can we come up with that down payment, and can we make things happen? And when you go to get financing, you're getting financing on an investment piece of real estate, makes it a little bit tougher. Can you get in? So, depending on the scenario, for me, the most common recommendation I make, go buy a home and make sure you have a basement suite and rent it out and get some frickin' roommates, because you're young anyways, and you don't need all the conveniences that you had from mom and dad's, and you literally have yourself set up that your mortgage payment is being made by your roommates, you control it all, and you live for free, and you've got an investment property that you can do one of two things. You can at some point sell in the future, and or gain some equity and pull some equity off the table and reinvest, or turn that into a property, move out, and just leave it as a rental property.
And for the kids, they call that, now in 2023, house hacking, but we just call that smart investing.
It is. It really is.
We all did that, right? Like, you buy a house and you live upstairs and you rent downstairs. I think what most people should do, especially the younger generation, is just flip it. Live in the basement.
Yep.
Right? And just get rid of that mindset that you need to kind of keep up with the Joneses. In Brampton, we say keep up with the things.
But it's an interesting conversation, Jazz, because here's the thing, right? Is that's the difference between, in my experience, that mindset is the difference between creating wealth early on and delaying it. And because you're living into a whole different, yes, live in the frickin' basement, rent it out. Get that upstairs hacked out, exactly, rent it out. And that's what you create wealth. If you have to move from mom and dad's and expect that same lifestyle, that same level of home, entering the conversation with, all of the bells and whistles, well, that's going to set you back. It's going to slow you down.
What do you think it is? Is it just because they don't want to tell people that they live in a basement? Like, is that kind of the mindset?
There's lots of ego around it, but I think it really is, we know what social media is like. You're on social media. I'm on social media. We're old enough and wise enough to know that those moments in time that are captured are just moments in time. It's like the couple walking down the beach in the sunset. It's like this perfect scenario. And little do they know that, literally 3 seconds before that shot was snapped, that couple was fighting, and she was going to storm off, right?
Laura always talks about it. If it didn't happen on Instagram, it never happened.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. It's those hallmark moments, right? So then what are you comparing yourself to? And the psychology of it is very interesting. And I think we can all be at the effect of it beating ourselves up for what we're not enough of. What we haven't achieved because we're busy comparing ourselves. But when you really dig into it, and being in the business that I'm in and been a coach for 25 years, and you start to realize what's in behind all of those pictures, right? And it's hard, though, to convey that message. There's a fundamental, it's interesting when it comes to all of that. There was a friend of mine, really wealthy guy, and he's over at my house, but I've used this question a lot. This is what opened up the conversation one day. And he wants to buy, he lives in the country, and like I say, very accomplished. He wants to buy a excavator because he's renting one. And he He said, I'm just going to buy one. And I says, well, how much for the excavator that you want to buy? And he goes, 150 grand. And I go, oh, okay. I go, you can rent a lot of excavator for 150 grand. You know, what does it cost you to rent an excavator? He says, a couple grand a week.
Right.
I go, gosh, you know, how many weeks do you need an excavator for, right? And he goes, yeah, but he goes, you know, that everybody in the neighborhood's got one, and they got a couple helicopters. Like, we live in the country, right? And so I'm going, and he's comparing himself to this, and I'm joking. So I finally said to him, I said, here's a question I got for you. And he goes, what? I go, if nobody knew you were going to own an excavator, would you buy an excavator? And he went, that's a good question. No. I go, so you don't need an excavator. Yeah. So that's the question. You know, I ask myself that question now with stuff. Not even buying stuff, but doing stuff.
Right.
If nobody knew I was going to do it, would I do it? You know, so many decisions are driven by ego, right?
Or filter it out.
It's a filter. Sure. It's a quick filter, right?
We have to talk about what's happening in the economy and real estate right now. And I know you have a lot of thoughts around this. We've done, you know, I was on your podcast, but you've been on our brunch live on YouTube that myself and Simeon do together for REC Canada. Talk about kind of what you saw happen in the last couple of years, and then we'll kind of transition into where you think this is heading.
Well, I think it's such a big conversation because there's so many things and factors that we haven't dealt with. You know, it's easy to think that it's the same as, you know, any kind of slowdown in an economy, but this has been a global event. You know, Bank of Canada, like all central banks, you know, all of a sudden money was flooding the market, interest rates came down. We could see a lot of things that happening, interesting within our own team and JG, you know, who's a big part of my team, my right-hand guy in all of what we do.
And he's in the room, so big shout out.
Yeah, big shout out to JG. You know, we talk a lot about what's going on economically. I mean, he's a very accomplished investor, so we're always in it, right? We're always thinking about what's going on. And, you know, there was a lot of things that we could see when the lockdown happened, and which was there would be a lot of opportunities gets created within the chaos. What we couldn't tell was just how long would the bank continue to pump money into the system and the actual effect of that. That was hard to anticipate. And we'd never been in it before. You know, you could kind of extrapolate it and think it. And we called, you know, I think that at that time we were making a lot of calls economically that were very correct, although timing was off a little bit. But when we see what's happening, and arguably the Bank of Canada now raising rates has started to slow things down. If I look into the future about it, and we can get into some detail if you like, I don't see a recession happening on a national basis.
Okay.
Now I want to qualify that with a couple things. You know, you in the real estate industry, you know, you guys getting your asses handed to you with what's going on and the slowdown, many realtors, right? It's like, what are you talking about? We're in a recession right now. That's some of the actual conversation. So it depends where you're at.
50% less sales. Like,
yeah. I mean, okay. So there you go.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're in it and your business has been affected by it, then 100% it feels like a recession. But economically, when you look at what's going on with GDP growth, technically we're not in a recession. And when we look at a national scale, Southern Ontario is going to feel a little bit more pain than most other provinces, and certainly more pain than what's happening in, let's say, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. And they'll see growth. And I don't think we'll see a true technical recession. So technical recession is when GDP growth goes into negative numbers. I think Southern Ontario overall, may get to that below the waterline that would put them into a technical recession, but I don't see that for the rest of the country today. Having said that, I got to qualify a couple things. We got geopolitical macro issues that's the wild card in all of it. You know, what's Russia and Ukraine going to do? What's China and Taiwan going to do? How is India's relationship with Russia going to impact? There's so many big macro West-East kind of conversations that we don't know that kind of is a wild card.
Now, where does the opportunity from your guys' perspective, yours personally, from Patrick, but then also Rain as a whole, where do you see some opportunity now within Canada? And I'm talking, it could be Edmonton, it could be Calgary, it could be Southern Ontario. Where do you guys see some opportunity?
Well, JG likes to joke and call me Mr. Alberta, but having said that,
I usually take your side on things as well, but I'm gonna have to kind of sway towards JG because I always think that you're a little bit Mr. Alberta as well. But continue, brother.
So right, we hear Alberta, but let's put it this way: when I look at what's an investor trying to do? Put their capital to work. Our job as an investor, make your money work harder for you than you work for your money. And when we look at what's happening economically, we got to take the emotion out of it. So, there was a time that, certainly in the past few years leading up to about 2019, pretty tough time in Alberta when you look at housing, right? Cash flow, yes. If you worked hard, rents were a little bit soft. Cash flow is a little bit soft. There wasn't a lot of appreciation in real estate that you owned. If you were buying real estate in, let's say, 2012, 14, guess what? You really had very little appreciation over that period of time. Mm-hmm. So that's not to say there was an opportunity there, but you didn't have the appreciation. On the other side of that, you come into Ontario, you guys were, you're kicking ass, right? You got huge growth, some decent cash flow if you're paying attention to what you were doing. So the tide has turned. It's not uncommon. So, I'm old enough to have been through probably 5 recessions. I'm old enough to know that historically, if you look at what's happening in Canada, there is always this kind of Ontario, Western provinces, Ontario, and it's a teeter-totter, right? And they never seem to be doing well at the same time. One is doing mediocre, the other is doing great.
Is there a reason for that?
No, I don't know. I think that's just the way the economy goes. I don't know that I have an answer for that particular question. It's, sometimes it's politics.
Got it.
When we look at what's happening in Alberta, up until now, they've been really driven by oil and gas, and that's changing. But when you look at what is happening in the oil and gas industry and the fight against it, they paid a price for that.
You said almost 5 recessions.
Yeah.
I want you to go into that head of yours, that beautiful, beautiful head of yours with all the facts, and try to think back. What were some of the similarities, if any, and what were the differences between those 5 recessions? Because for me personally, and my viewers and listeners know, I did this podcast for one reason and one reason only. It's for selfish reasons. I'm trying to siphon everyone's information and kind of take from there and run with it. And whoever listens with me, great. And whoever doesn't, that's okay. So these 5 that you would have went through, what were some of the similarities and what were some of the differences? So we don't have to
I don't know if I can give you that information from that perspective. I can tell you this, that what I've learned is that up until really the past couple, recessions, like so many, it shut me down. Because what's happening? All you're reading is headlines about unemployment. All you're hearing is, the bad news stuff that leaves you sitting on the sidelines waiting for something. Like this can't be good. I'm not going to get into this. And also as a business owner, in my retail business, I could feel the slowdown. People had less disposable income and they weren't spending as much money. So what have I learned? I can say this, regardless of what we're going to hear, and we're going to start to hear some things around unemployment, and I think that's a good conversation to have for your viewers, is that isn't the time to sit on the sidelines. It is the time to pay attention and look for opportunities, and most of those opportunities for the more seasoned investors or for the educated investors will be solving problems.
Elaborate for me.
Well, there's a lot of people that are going to be having problems right away. They're already having. And, for your realtor audience, is if you're a realtor that can solve problems, that's where opportunities get created. Because here's some of the problems that are starting to happen. People own real estate that they bought, let's say, on a pre-construction deal. They can't close on that deal. They haven't been able to assign it. They never intended on owning it. They were always going to assign it. Guess what? The music stopped. Those aren't investors. Those are speculators. They're gambling. They're rolling the dice and they got caught. It's like playing musical chairs. The music stopped. You don't have a chair. Now, they have a problem. Can you solve that problem? You're going to have individuals at any given time that are getting transferred. They're going through a divorce. There's been a death in the family. All of a sudden, they find themselves, they don't have a job. They can't cover the mortgage payment. Oh my gosh, I'm caught with a house. I don't know what I'm going to do. My wife's left me, my husband, whatever the story is. There's always life happenings. And if you can look at that and go, I can solve that problem. I can bring an investor in here. Hey, Mr. Investor, come with me. Let's get creative around a strategy that can work. If you put a basement suite in this, we get this deal. Guess what? We can make this cash flow. You start to create opportunities. Often what people are looking for, or they think that opportunities are going to land in their lap,
Right.
And it's just not going to, well, they do happen but you have to know. If you can't recognize an opportunity, and if you don't know what's possible, you'll never see the opportunity. You just won't. We use a term that with many of our RAIN members and with RAIN member realtors, where they're actually what we call deal engineers.
Okay.
And the deal engineers are the realtor's ability to walk in because they understand pro formas, they understand real estate, they understand the need of an end user client, and they can go in with their investor client and say, here's an opportunity, here's what you can do, right? What about this? What about that? And many times the investor themselves, if they've got that savvy, which many do, they go, this is what I'm looking for. Bring me this kind of a deal.
How does a realtor, because we're kind of on this topic, get the education on becoming better deal engineers, right? So like they're novice, they kind of understand why they should become more investor savvy. They get it. They maybe see myself and the other, couple of handful of people that are doing it at the level that we're doing it in our city. But how do they go actually get that information? How do they educate themselves?
Well, it's interesting, and the stats better than I do, is that how few realtors are actually investors themselves.
I'm going to say maybe 5%.
Yeah.
I'll give you maybe 10, but no, I'm going to 5%.
Yeah, maybe.
5%.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
And here's the fundamental is that, JG and I have had these conversations with realtors many times over the years, which is, I was so busy making my clients rich.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me that I should do the same. And so first off is a shift of what this group is doing right today. They're sitting with somebody like yourself. They're listening to this kind of a conversation.
Oh, they're only here for you, not for me. But I'm telling you right now. If I just told them I'm doing a podcast with somebody and they're all shaking, they wouldn't even come. It's because of you. So.
The fundamental difference between a realtor that is investor focused is they understand relationship versus transactions. And when you get with an investor and you work with a qualified investor and you start to help them succeed in that space, all of a sudden you're working with an individual who might do 3, 5, 7, 15 deals. And I'll give you an example. JG, in this upcoming weekend, we're doing an event called Think Tank, and we've got a group of quite sophisticated investors that are coming together, and it's just a think tank. It's get together, and we're going to facilitate an amazing conversation, do all those things. That aside, we're doing some pre-conversations. Both him and I have had conversations with investors. I had one this morning, 17 doors. Another investor, 24 doors. And I know JG's had a conversation with others. So one person, 17 doors. So how hard does a realtor have to work to get 17 transactions? And so when you start to understand the investor mindset and you can align with that, you start to see, okay, relational. I can create a relationship. All he wants me to do or she wants me to do is bring me these kinds of deals. Oh shit, I'll go look for those kinds of deals and I'll bring
the
them.
best drug in the world. Once they get addicted to it, the investors, they want to do it over and over and over
Exactly.
again, right?
Exactly. But that's a mindset on the realtor's point.
Yes.
Right? It's like you don't care investors don't care what the sink looks like or the cupboards look like. Depending on, they're going to probably knock it all down, rebuild it anyways. So it's a different way of it. It's just math. You're taking the emotion out of it and go, okay, based on the economic fundamentals, based on the math, based on the tenant profile you want, this is going to be an awesome deal.
You use the term deal engineers, and I'm going to probably steal that from you guys anyways a little bit, and I'm going to make use of it. I love it. One thing that we're actually going to be practicing more in 2023 within our investor community at REC Canada is actually putting joint ventures together. Because we have people who have $60,000, $70,000 in capital, and they want to do something here in their own backyard, but unfortunately, $60,000, $70,000 as a down payment just can't get you that far, specifically in the Greater Toronto area. And so, but then we have someone else that has that $60,000, $70,000. We can start to put more joint ventures together. What are the 3-4 things that somebody needs to know as an investor before they get into a joint venture?
Oh man, there isn't 3 or 4 things is not even a warm up,
Yeah.
Well, I think there's, first and foremost, there has to be the education side of the equation. So because within the real estate, we think all realtors should be part of the REIN community. We see the demand for realtors within our own community. Like, we're a national organization with investors across the country, and one of the things they struggle with is finding investor-focused realtors. There's lots of realtors out there, as we know.
Right.
But there's not a lot of investor-focused realtors. So that's one fundamental. And so the education part of it is really, really important. And when it comes to raising capital, even an investor-focused realtor can start to say, oh, I can bring these two together maybe. So that's that's a deal engineer, okay?
Right.
That's part of a deal engineer. But when it comes to understanding joint ventures and what you need to know if you're raising capital, first and foremost, you need to know your exit strategy. You cannot be going in for just the money because you've got a relationship with somebody. I'll take JG's joke here, is that you're getting in, you're having a joint venture partner, and statistically, you're probably going to be with your joint venture partner longer than you will in a marriage. Okay. It's like people go through divorces, so.
Well, it's like Simeon.
Right.
I mean, he's my business partner, but he's the second wife I never needed.
Yeah,
You know what
exactly.
I mean? Yeah, for sure. Big shout out to Simeon.
So that's,
I know he's watching and listening.
And then people, like, if I see one of the most common mistakes made. So first off, they don't plan the exit. Number two, they chase the money rather than understanding that behind the money is a relationship that has to be, you have to align. What do you bring to the table? What are you bringing to the table? The last thing you need is, two people that want to have a joint venture, but neither of them have money, or both of them have money and neither of them know how to do a deal. So what are you bringing to the table? The exit strategy part of it, and then getting it in writing in a way that makes sense. We see that one often with friends. And I often joke, I go, if I'm doing a joint venture with my mother, I want to paper that deal. It's not because I don't trust my mom, right? But, things go wrong in life, and if I got hit by the bus, the proverbial bus, my mom needs to know that, okay, this is my deal, and here's the paperwork, and here's the titles and all the rest of it.
And
so
she could be protected.
you need to be protected. So that's on that side of it. And of course, partnerships go south. And in any scenario, life happens at a joint venture level. So for example, I'll give you a quick example, which is simply, you've got a joint venture agreement with a couple, they're money partners, and something in their life changes. I need to get my money off the table. Well, hold it. We knew this was going to be a 5-year deal. I get it. I got to get out.
Now
I need my money.
You personally, as an investor, Patrick, are you more like a buy and hold guy? Like, what's your kind of?
Always been buy and hold.
Okay.
Oh, that was my only strategy. Because I ran the business, my passion isn't real estate. My passion is business, and I love doing business. I love coaching. I love supporting people's success. So my portfolio was to augment, to be a part of my overall, we'll call it retirement plan, if you will. It was really designed in that way, not to be a business that I drove every day. So I have had partners in the past, and they were very operational, and we built great portfolios. And, that was kind of how, but I was never, and I shouldn't say never. I spent a lot of time in the trenches early on, and I went, doesn't interest me.
When you say trenches, you mean like going in and doing
deals,
the burrs and the
exactly.
fixer-uppers and all that kind of stuff?
Exactly. Early on, I did all that stuff.
And now
Managed my own properties, did all that.
you no longer do the managing of the properties.
No.
You kind of just delegate.
No, I
that
got
out.
one kind of real, kind of executive loft that I handle my own.
Is that more because it's like a little bit?
Well,
of a passion, or just-
it's a cool deal, and
Okay.
it's an interesting property. It's a building that's 110 years old or something like that. It's
Alberta?
In Alberta, yeah.
Okay.
And it's a really cool property.
So
and
he is Mr. Alberta, JG.
so you don't have to humor him. Like, I don't need you guys.
Southern Ontario. What do you like about it from an investment perspective?
You've got the one fundamental thing that the other provinces, well, I shouldn't say other than BC, well, you got population growth. You got industry, you've got jobs, and ultimately that's what you need to see growth in real estate.
Now, with Alberta, what's always concerned me is the peaks and the valleys in terms of appreciation.
Yeah.
Right? Personally, I didn't like what happened in Ontario a couple of years ago, that 20%
Lift,
lift,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Because something goes up that fast, it has to come down. I just kind of want to get your thoughts on, did that scare you? And if so, how do you feel like when Alberta kind of does that as well?
Well, we get frustrated like anybody else. You're riding the wave, and then all of a sudden you get the rug pulled out from under you. It's interesting is that, I learned some really expensive lessons in terms of investing in a town, for example, that isn't necessarily a one-horse town, but it's driven by one economy. And in Alberta, you have those smaller centers. I'll use Grand Prairie as an example because I had a lot of real estate in Grand Prairie, and it was booming. It's a city over 50,000 people, brand new hospital, probably at the time a $1.5 billion hospital went into it. Like it was really a city that was building. But when oil got hit, it was like the city shut down, and you start to understand more the dynamics of population, but the dynamics and the diversity of an economy. And one of the things that has happened and why you're seeing growth in Alberta is Alberta has diversified. The oil industry has changed a lot. So as much as we think about, we have to understand that the oil industry technology has taken over that world. And so it's not even dependent on the same labor force that it was in the past.
It's not just about the oil rigs.
No, it's not. I mean,
technology in itself probably offers a lot of jobs.
It used to be 15 guys on a rig floor. Now it's 3. And, and they're probably in a downtown office in Calgary doing it remotely. It's like that. It's gotten that sophisticated. So it's a different, and they've diversified the economy a lot. And that's why you're seeing so many people flooding into that province right now.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. If you had to choose between Edmonton and Calgary from a long-term growth, because I'm a buy and hold guy, so I'm kind of asking more for myself. I have $100,000 I want to invest, and I have to invest in one of the two. Where would you advise?
Well, there's a couple things around that question, right? The first of which is, what is your long-term goal? If you're a long-term buy and hold guy, the first thing I'm saying, and I'll say this, and I know I'll get in trouble for it, but I'll say it anyways. Do not buy a freaking condo in Calgary or Edmonton.
Tell us why.
Especially Edmonton.
Because we're Toronto guys. We're sitting in my headquarters here in Toronto. We're about condos. But I love that you always say, don't do it in Alberta.
Don't do it.
Go.
Don't do it. Don't do it. There's a number of things around that. Number one is in Edmonton, they've built far too many. When things were booming, they were actually taking apartment buildings, converting them into condos, and that strategy back then was the term was buy by the yard, sell by the inch. Okay, that was the term that was used back then. Well, it flooded the whole market with them, and then the downturn, and the next thing you know, there's all these condos, and there is no market for them. So, and then a lot of new build condos, and the market turns down, nobody can sell. So what did those developers do? They started renting out. And so the fundamentals around condo is also, I'm going to use the term culture, but your wide open prairies, there's space is not a problem. We don't ever have a conversation about we don't have room.
Right.
They're sprawling. Calgary and Edmonton are both sprawling cities.
People don't think about in those areas like, I would love to have a 600 square foot condo in downtown Edmonton. No. That's just not their mindset.
Well, think about it. We joke about it all the time. You can go into Grand Prairie, nobody would even look at a condo because in Grand Prairie, as an example, Oil City, you got to know your client. What do? They make a lot of money. They then spend it on toys.
Helicopters?
And it's boats, bikes.
I was going to say helicopters.
Helicopters, yeah. Boats, bikes, snowmobiles.
Got it.
They need a place to put it. So, 600 square feet, I mean, that isn't even enough for their garage, right? So that's it. So it's just a different mindset. It's a different way of being. And of course, cost-wise, they can buy a lot of yard. They can buy a lot of house for, that kind of dough.
Going back to my question, though, and it's my fault because I cut you off a couple of times. Edmonton or Calgary, long-term growth. I'm not doing a condo, so that's good.
Yeah, if I was going in today, I would probably go into Calgary.
Okay.
But having said that, I can do that because I also know that it's interesting you ask this question. So here's a fundamental. Historically, Edmonton always follows Calgary about a year to year and a half later. So you're starting to see growth in Calgary right now. I think 8% increase even in 2022. Like it was, and even to this day, growing, slowing down a little bit, but growth. And Edmonton would traditionally follow that. Mm-hmm. But what's missing in that mix, and this is just a recent realization, you're hearing it here first, is I don't think Edmonton's going to this time. And the reason I don't think Edmonton's going to this time, and the reason I don't think so is because Fort McMurray is not what Fort McMurray once was. And Fort McMurray was only a 4.5 hour drive from Edmonton. And if you lived on the outskirts of Edmonton, on the kind of the northeast end, it was a relatively easy drive into Fort McMurray. But Fort McMurray isn't producing what it was before. It isn't, again, with the oil sands, the technology's changed and the demand is different. And Fort McMurray's got hammered a couple of times. Fire burnt the whole town down almost. That's not true, but they really got hit. Then they got hit with a flood. And, Suncor being one of the biggest developers in that area, in the oil sands area, they've changed their dynamics as well. So that drove a lot of job growth and a lot of demand into Edmonton. So that's changed the dynamic of Edmonton as well. Grand Prairie, the same thing. So it's all to say this. I think Edmonton is still a long-term play, but it's not going to be what Calgary is.
I mean, I hope my viewers and listeners understand why we like to talk about buy and hold a lot, because what happens with values going up, interest rates going up, values then coming down, it doesn't affect you as much when you know that, okay, I'm going to hold on to this property for 15 years, 20 years. If not, I'm going to pass it. Like I'll probably hold on to this forever and just pass it on and have that generational wealth. What's kind of your thoughts about that when you hear people saying, well, I'm really in it for the quick buck?
Well, then you got to have a different strategy. It's always about the strategy. We will always use the comment, often say it, is just there is no bad economy. There's just a wrong strategy within that economy. And so you have to change what it is that you're doing within an economy. So for right now, when you start to see the challenges of getting financing, you've got immigrants coming in that can't get financing, number one, because they're immigrants. They don't have a credit rating, but they still want to have a home. And, we start to see that lease to own, rent to own is a great opportunity in this particular marketplace. Fix and flip, you better know what you're doing.
Right.
Ultimately. But these are little strategy tweaks that you have to do to get in, get out,
I love that you said, like, when you're fixing and flipping, you better know what you're doing, because I have friends who are like on those national TV shows, and that shit doesn't happen in 22 minutes like they show on TV. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're good friends of mine.
JG pulls it off. JG pulls it off. Yeah, but he's JG.
He's special.
He's special.
So you better know what you're doing with that. And you better have, like, there's just so much around the fixing and flipping, right? Like, understanding that the contractors are not going to do what they said at the time that they said they're going to do, making sure that you have a slush fund and all that. And what you guys teach at Rain is a lot of these different strategies. You put people together. How did you get connected with Rain? Because when I first heard of it, I've been licensed for 19 years, so 2004. It was originally, I believe, Don Campbell.
Don R. Campbell, yeah.
At that time,
I
think I'm bang on right around 04, 05.
Yeah.
How did you get involved with that? And then I really want to talk about and give you kind of the mic and talk about all things kind of Rain.
So hold that thought for one second.
Sure.
And I want to just finish on one thing about Alberta, in case we don't circle back, understanding that particular market. And when I say don't buy condos, the reason I'm stressing that right now is because what's happening, and we see this as a common mistake of investors / speculators, is they're looking at Calgary and they can go, I can buy a condo for $400,000, for $250,000. Like, that's cheap. And money is actually flooding into Calgary. And I think that there's going to be some pain down the road if people don't understand. If you're going to get into that condo market, you better be with a realtor that knows what the hell they're doing. They know that city really, really well. And then you better hope that you can get out in 3 to 5 years. If you hang on longer than that, it's going to eat your lunch.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because there is billboards all over the city of Toronto selling condos for Calgary.
Yep.
Like selling Calgary condos and stuff. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because whoever's watching or listening, there is that one person who's probably thinking about investing. They better know what they're doing, or at least doing it with somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah. And I know we have great realtor partners in Calgary. I trust them because they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So if they're selling a condo to somebody from Toronto, they're already having the conversation with that person about, okay, this is what you're going to do, and you need to be out in this time frame. And there's all sorts of little things that you have to understand. Like I say, culturally, you have to understand that the mindset of people is not to, why would I rent a condo? And not that they don't. Why would I rent it when I can rent a house and be on the main floor and do all this? So there's comparisons that we get drawn. But as an investor, you have to consider that we know that in Alberta, strata fees only ever go up, and they go up sometimes dramatically. We're at the effect of the insurance industry. And if you want to go back and a little bit of history of Alberta, and you start to realize that some of those condo boards had to literally increase their strata fees double the strata fees to cover the shortfall of the cost of insurance that shifted in Alberta. And why did it shift in Alberta? Well, it shifted because of everything from the flood and the fire in Fort McMurray to the hailstorms in Calgary to the other floods in other parts of southern Calgary and in Calgary. So Alberta got hammered weather-wise a number of times over a few years. Well, the insurance industry is going, we're not taking the risk. We're not going to mitigate. We got to mitigate that risk. And they do that by, of course, increasing insurance costs.
Which cuts into your cash flow. It's completely different.
And the next thing you know, your fees, your strata fees are doubling. So, you know.
And just for everybody who's listening, if you're in Ontario, when Patrick says strata fees, that's just maintenance fees, condo fees.
Yes, exactly.
And that's the term they use in the West. I love the fact that you use the word culture, because here in the GTA, the culture is different when it comes around condos, right? Not to say that they're the best investments within real estate either. No. Obviously, we do a lot of them and we help our clients, but I never want anyone to think that that is the best type of investment. I think it's a great investment for people who are starting out and obviously diversifying. But the culture here in the GTA is, well, bro, I do not want to shovel the snow.
Yeah.
I don't really care about cutting the grass.
Yeah, totally.
I don't care about all the extra space. We laugh all the time. People have a 2,500 square foot home. They really felt it in COVID that they probably only used 700 square feet of it anyways. And the only time they maybe use the other part of the home is when they didn't like the sound of their partners blinking, because we were so close with each other during that time, right? But aside from that, people love condos in the GTA because we don't have to do the upkeep and the maintenance.
Yeah, the thing is that when, as investors, what do? We want to buy down a mortgage and we want to get some appreciation. And the condo market historically in Alberta is you get a little bit of gains and then it goes flat and then it comes back. So you have to look at it as an investor and saying, well, what do I want to get out of this?
Yep.
And it's just not the best use of capital in that market.
Well, again, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record because I keep on saying I love what you said, but the fact that you always want to know your exit strategy, obviously you mentioned it more with a joint venture partner, but look, I mean, you're always kind of doing a joint venture partner with at least minimum the person in the mirror. You want to ask that person, hey, what am I going to plan to do with this? Because when shit does hit the fan, like we're kind of feeling right now with the cost of borrowing increasing so much, if you're going to do it for the long term, you know you're going to end up winning. But now get two hosts on a couch together, go off on a bunch of tangents.
Yeah.
You more than me.
Of course.
I want to go back to Rain.
Okay,
because
please.
Like you made a joke, I asked you just while we were walking over here from the office how many members, and you're like, yeah, we got a couple of members. And I know you were joking as well. I mean, you guys are by far the largest real estate investment network. Obviously that's your name, but you guys are by far the biggest investment group in the country. I mean, just kudos to like yourself and I know you enough, Patrick. I know you put it on your team. Like you got an amazing crew. I've been very blessed to deal with a lot of them. How many members are you kind of at, like where you're at right now?
I can't even answer that question honestly. What I can tell you is that over the course of the years, they've transacted $5.4 billion worth of real estate.
That's with a B.
There's been about 180,000 people through our programs over the years. Amazing. And, at any given time, we've got probably 30,000 that we're communicating with.
And again, as I said it earlier on, I think you guys, and full transparency, I mean, I have no incentive by saying this. I don't get paid to say this. I'm actually very close with other investment groups as well. But again, what you guys do best is your data and how you put it out there and how consistently you put out data. So your what I call kind of crack team, your research and development team, I mean, is one of the best. And like, how did you guys put all that together? Like,
there's a fundamental that we believe, right? Which is, and it's not to say it's right, but we don't sell real estate.
Yes.
Okay. True. So we don't believe that we can provide great research and unbiased research if we have skin in the game, as in we've got a deal to sell. There's lots of those individuals out there, right? It's like, join me, I'll show you how awesome this town is and how to invest in real estate. And oh, by the way, I just happen to have the perfect model that you might want to take. And I'm not going to make that model wrong. People have had a lot of success with it. It just isn't what we do. And so our stand is that at this point has been that we're not going to sell a deal in the back end. So you come for the education, you come for the network, you can come for the access to trusted partners right across the board in terms of, meeting people like yourself, meeting accountants, meeting lawyers, meeting mortgage brokers. So really doesn't matter. It becomes this resource that you don't have to sweat it. You're dealing with proven, what we call trusted partners that are investors themselves. They're investor focused. That's what the network is about. That's what the community is about. It's a culture of collaboration. It's a culture of sharing. It's not about people holding their cards close. I'm not going to tell you what I did. No, don't do what I did, or do what I did. Like, this really works, you know? So that's really what the community is all about. The research, and we have a research team. I do a lot of research because it's just kind of how I'm built. I'm interested in it. I like it. I don't know why, but it's, you know, I like to try and see the future and analyze the data and figure shit out. And I'm very politically, you know, activated.
I like that word.
So
That's a new one. I haven't heard that.
I
one
want to
before.
push my buttons, talk politics, you know, because, you know, I just have a strong view of how our country's run. And I'm really realizing, you know, at this point in my life, you know, just how small our country is, but how big of an impact we could have in the world. So I get a little bit fired up when we're not doing that. So, you know.
Do you think the government made the wrong decision in terms of how long they kept us locked down?
Well, okay, so Jazz,
Yeah.
you're a business guy.
Yeah.
You knew 2 weeks after they locked us down
Yeah.
that it was too long.
Bang on.
So they overreacted. That's my opinion of it.
Yep.
The banks overreacted. You know, Tiff Macklem should have been fired.
Yeah.
You know, given what he did in terms of interest rates. It's like, you didn't have to be a sophisticated anything, I don't believe. A little bit of business savvy. Many business guys were seeing it going, what the hell are they doing, and why are they doing this? This makes no sense. They don't need to do this. They're overreacting. They're, you know, putting too much liquidity into the market. This is going to lead to inflation. It's going to lead to problems. You know, like, everybody, it seemed, could see it, but the Bank of Canada and our federal government.
Why?
Well, that's, you know, that becomes, you know, if you listen to people who believe in conspiracy theory, then it would be a conspiracy theory. You know, that they did it because they want to shut this down or that down, and then the World Economic Forum comes to play. And I've got all those stories, by the way. I know them all.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you know, and I don't remember the exact quote. I wish I did, but, you know, don't accredit anything to conspiracy that can be really accredited to just stupidity and incompetence.
I like that. I do like that.
Right?
Because
So
there's
that's
some stupid decisions,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
It was just, and that is not even in hindsight. And JG would attest to how fired up I got about certain things. And, you know, the writing was so clear because it just was clear. And, you know, we saw the breakdown in supply chain. We saw inflation coming because of supply. As we sit here today, given Tiff Macklem, you know, commitment to bringing inflation down, you know, he's going to look at some part. He's going to look like a genius, and it's going to because inflation will start to come down, and it's because supply chains are opening up finally and
Right.
have opened up, and things are starting to flow, and goods are starting to come into the market. There'll be some deflationary things because all of those sea containers that were stock now opened up. Now all that inventory is rolling in, and guess what? I don't need this inventory. They're going to blow it out. So we're going to see some stuff come down. But ultimately, it's going to be, well, look what interest rates did. Well, interest rates had no impact on supply chain. Right now, oil prices are down as we have this conversation, but oil prices will go up again. We'll start to see that shift again. That's my own research, my own opinion, by the way. And so ultimately, when I see the overreaction, it is now we're paying the price. You know, Tiff looked into the camera or whatever it was and said, you know, interest rates are going to
years ago.
remain low for a very long time. They're not going to go up until at least 2023, and, you know, release the hounds. And what happens is everybody went out, they bought, they drove the economy, they renovated, they bought boats, they invested in real estate, they did whatever they did, and they borrowed money to do it. And so you've got a large population of people that are over leveraged. And right now that's kind of like getting a margin call, kind of.
100%.
Yeah.
You've been actually, I didn't even have to, you know, look at JG in terms of you when you were getting revved up and amped up 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, a year ago, with what was happening in our economy, because you do a lot of content. When did you start shifting into actually like putting out a lot of videos? And then I want to talk about your podcast as well, which I think is like one of the best podcasts out there. The team will make sure they put all the links and everything there. But when did you start to make the shift of like, okay, I'm just going to get in front of camera and start putting these videos up like on your LinkedIn? Like, I think you're very, like, I think that's one of your favorite platforms.
Well, I like, LinkedIn and Twitter. I mean, I like LinkedIn better. It's more mature. It's more civil. I don't know. It's more intelligent to me. It's not just rants. You know,
we all have our like.
Well, like I can rant on LinkedIn too, but Twitter's a good format for that. But anyways, I like LinkedIn. I think when we did the pivot, as a team, we have an international team. So when JG and one of the other executive, Bonnie, when they came on board several years ago, we had an international team. So there's a couple aspects to get to your question. So JG is an expert in marketing as well. He has a huge history in terms of his marketing, and we were just cutting our teeth on, how to do a Facebook Live, and we were all freaked out about it. And he's just like, dude, stand in front of the camera and talk. It was like that, right? So that was several years ago. We had an international team. So Zoom was our normal kind of way of operation. So when COVID hit, we actually did an event in Calgary of March 7th of 2020.
Literally a week, I think.
Literally the week before, yes.
Yeah.
And so we had several hundred people there, although we did have some people cancel from Ontario that would normally have traveled to Calgary to be at that event. We still had several hundred people show up for that event. That was on the 7th, which was a Saturday, Sunday kind of thing, whatever it was. And then literally we flew home and we were locked down. The thing was that we literally turned the cameras on within a couple of weeks, and we're doing events live.
You were up because you already had
we already knew what we were doing.
Zoom.
Yeah, we were already on Zoom. We were already doing it. And of course, like I say, we got an amazing team, and I give JG and Bonnie and that whole crowd a lot of credit because we were already doing that.
Right.
So for us, it was already some version of normal. And yes, we had to up our game and get backgrounds and do all the things that we did. But we were teaching members how to be on Zoom. And it was great. So we had a big crowd. We had a really, I guess, a pretty cool audience, given that nobody else had, they're still trying to figure out how to spell Zoom.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So we were already.
And turn on the mic. You're on mute.
You're on mute. Yeah.
That's like the most said word in 2020.
Yeah. I got voted with the team. I got voted with the team with the one person that's always going to, we have a little competition, like little awards that we give at the end of the year, and I'm the guy voted most likely to have his mic on mute. So, anyways, I digress.
Your podcast.
Yeah, podcast.
How did that start? When did that start? And how did you come up with the name?
The Everyday Millionaire was really, I'd had lots of people say, write a book, write a book, write a book. I'm just not inspired to write a book, although, JG has pointed, he's got a background in publishing, and I've released some reports and been really at the core of driving that authorship. And and he's going, dude, you just wrote a half a book. Why don't you just write the other half and then write a book? Anyway, that's a little bit of a side joke. But the podcast was at the time was almost 7 years ago. I think it was 7 years ago this year. And it came to me in terms of people suggesting I should write a book. It didn't really appeal to me. And it literally was an idea on a beach in St. Lucia. And I said, I'm going to launch a podcast. And while I was sitting on the beach, I came up with the name The Everyday Millionaire. And it was because there was a lot of podcasts that like to, and I get it, interview all of the billionaires and all of the who's who, the big names. But I'm surrounded by what I refer to as everyday millionaires. Just people who chugged away, did their thing, created amazing wealth, all have a cool story, many do, and was more achievable. And when at the time when I did the research, and the numbers have changed a little bit, less than 1% of the North American population, but we'll talk about Canada, less than 1% are actual have a net worth of $1 million. Yet that's a common number that people want to achieve.
Right.
Now, if you live in certain circles, you go, what are you talking about? But the reality is, data shows that a true millionaire net worth, less than 1% of the population. Now that number's changed. It's up around 4%, 5%.
Okay.
But it's still a very, very small number that achieved that status of millionaire. So I started interviewing guests called the Everyday Millionaire, those individuals who were on a clear path, who had businesses, who had real estate, who were, achieving amazing results. And that if they could do it, you could do it too. That was the whole concept. Seemingly ordinary people that were achieving extraordinary results.
That's why you probably had me on it. Like, if this idiot can do it.
Exactly. That's what he said. If this guy can do it, you can definitely do it.
For me, the one thing that really changed the course of my business, and it really has changed the course of my life now, is my podcast. It's I'm going to say it's like my top in business and in like work stuff, other than like personal family, like wife, kids, and parents and all that. Other than maybe the immersion program, it's immersion and podcast that kind of I go back and forth. It changed the course of my life. Like I love it. I don't really have to, like, it doesn't feel like work for me.
Yeah.
It's opened up so many doors. I mean, I'm sitting here with you. We're talking. I was like, oh, you brought JG with you. I'm like, JG, let's do a podcast too, man.
100%.
Your story, some close friends.
He's
of mine.
way more interesting than I am, by the way. I'm telling you
We'll
right
see
now.
about that. You know what? We're going to let the viewers decide that
We'll
one.
let the viewers decide.
Jury's
Yes, of
out on
course.
that one. For you, though, Patrick, what has the podcast done for your business and maybe your life? I don't know. You don't have to take it that far, but like, what has it done for you professionally?
I couldn't say what it's done for the business. I think it's always interesting, the listeners that will follow up and go, I listened to your podcast and it's awesome and I've learned so much. And so that's always really encouraging. I mean, otherwise you're just speaking into a microphone and hoping like hell somebody's somebody listening to this conversation. But I think for me professionally, in terms of my own development, I joke about, JG giving me a hard time, say, just look into the camera and frickin' talk, dude. Like, quit worrying about it. And that was really hard to do. But what I realized is, number one, I'm a tough study.
Okay.
But number two is he was right. And so, at the end of the day, now it's just a normal way of being, and we couldn't do it any other way. It really, if you're passionate about the message that you have, if you really believe in what you're doing and that you do, in fact, have something to share with people that's of value, it is the absolute way you have to do it. And it's effective and it works. What I've noticed with the podcast, and especially the past couple of years, and especially this past year, and I guess it's just time spent, thousands of listeners, tens of thousands of listeners, and I'm being approached on a regular basis by some really cool people, that like I've got a couple of guests that are sitting in the hopper that I'm really excited about interviewing them.
See how cool that is, right? Like, it just
cool.
opens up so many doors, right?
Yeah.
That I think people don't realize that just by putting yourself out there a little bit, and it's tough, I'm sure, as you mentioned, like, if you didn't have someone like a JG and maybe your team saying like, you really got to do this, maybe you wouldn't have done it as quickly or whatever. But I have a feeling, how many episodes are you at now for yours? Off the top of your head, like, are you in the hundreds now? Obviously, you're 7 years ago.
Well, 7 years ago, but every 2 weeks. But then my wife and I do another podcast called Mindset Matters.
Right.
So my wife Stephanie is an Olympic mental performance coach. So we do a segment every week, little 30-minute segments called Mindset Matters, and we just talk about mindset. And she works with world-class and Olympic class athletes, but we have always translated that into business.
Well, my business partner in the media company, Laura Stewart, just started the Laura Show, and she won't have me on. She won't have you on, RJG, because she only has females on. So
I can line you up with some frickin' all stars.
Okay? So like
like big, like really cool.
Like, it's
cool.
all about the stories of women and just kind of going through their whole thing.
I've got 3 right off the top of my head that would love to be on your show, and you would love them. And the next thing you know, they're going to be best friends.
Okay, perfect. That's awesome. We'll make that connection and all that.
Yeah.
What I was saying was, I'm actually trying to speak very loudly on why investors, not only business people, real estate agents, CEOs, but why investors should be putting out content, specifically a podcast, because I think it's a great way to let other potential maybe joint venture partners get to know that investor, sit down and learn more. Like, I personally think the investing community is one of the most positive communities out there. I go to like business meetups, and I always find people are holding stuff close to their chest. Like, I'm not going to tell Jazz my secret because then he's going to steal it. Where investors, like you said earlier, are like, don't do this strategy because I hit my head against the wall, or make sure you use my mortgage broker, Chris. He's awesome, right? Like there's all these people who are sharing in that environment, but there's just not a lot of people who are putting out content from an investor's perspective.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
Are you finding that's just there might be some opportunity in white space there?
Well, I think I'm not clear on your question, Jess. So, let me go back to content.
Yeah.
So to establish so writing a book, being an author, the whole concept of that at its core is if you are an author, you are an authority. Okay? The word author comes from authority. So when you become an authority and you write the book, guess what you've done? You've provided content and you've established yourself as the authority in that space. So, there's a lot of competition in that space that may turn off people from doing content. I can't do what they do. They're doing that. It just doesn't really appeal to me. You have to push yourself through that edge. And, you're one of those guys that doesn't need to be scripted. You just riff shit off, and
How'd you know that? I you didn't know that I did have a script on my
phone? Yeah, you got a script. But you may script some stuff, but most of your stuff is not scripted, right? Yeah. You just know what you've got flow, you've got things going. I'm not good at monologues. As a matter of fact, Stephanie was not here to do a Mindset Matters segment with me, which means I have to do a monologue. And I hate it. I'm just not good at it. Yeah. My brain doesn't fire that fast. So I need somebody to, let me catch my breath, give me a thought. And that's, that
bantering back.
That's bantering back. Yeah. That works really well for me. I can do this all day long. Yeah. And I think I can do it quite well if I stay focused on some stuff. But ultimately, for realtors that are trying to establish themselves, they have to put that content out. They have to get uncomfortable. And it only takes practice. There's a fundamental thing around that we've learned with I use the analogy all the time with athletes. When you see a world-class athlete, you have to go into the background and go, how many times did they fall down? Thousands of times that they fall down in practice. Thousands of times that they show up at a competition that they lose. You have to go through that learning curve. You're not going to look into a camera and hit it out of the park the first time. You're just not. You got to do it, and it just is in that. You are the business of you. As a realtor, consider yourself the business of you. Even if you're in a brokerage, all the rest of it, you are the business of you, and you start to establish that part of you, and you look into the camera, and all of a sudden, you start to show up, and people get to resonate with you. Two guys sitting here right now, we're having this conversation, and if we are both realtors, somebody's going to be attracted to you, somebody's going to be attracted to me. Nothing to do with what we said. It's just the energy, how we show up, the values that we have. They may interview us both and pick one or the other, but the point is you're always going to attract like-minded individuals. So back to the REIN community, we're very clear on our ethos. And part of our ethos is that, 4 dimensions of trust, the energy that we bring to any relationship that we have, the heart that we put into it because we give a shit, we really care. And, and about sharing. So that is, we took ethos because that's how my brain fires. I turned it into an acronym, but that's really what it is all about. So when you create that ethos, then the community aligns with that. And so that's how the whole community has a tendency to show up. And that's what is attracted, is because that's how I operate, that's how I think, that's how I show up naturally, it's just how I'm wired. It's why JG and I can be friends, it's why Bonnie can be part of this conversation, it's why we have the executive team that we have. Mm-hmm. And then that all just flows out into the values that you share and that people align with.
Somebody's watching this and listening to this right now, and what would be the best way for them to connect with you personally, as well as connect with the network?
Well, going to REINCanada.com, always.
Easiest place.
Easiest place. Get on the website. Anybody, it's a public, I share it all the time. CEO at REINCanada.com. So CEO at REINCanada.com is an email that always comes to me. And
thank you.
Put it out there all the time.
And when they go on the REIN website, is that the place where they can just get more information in terms of how? Yep,
about our membership, about what we do, about how we do it, where there's a learning, where they can, what level do they want to embrace in terms of learning?
Yeah.
So we just re-released a what we call Real Estate Investing in Canada. It is a video program, education program that teaches the 15 steps, absolutely world-class. And, you know, if you want to just enter a conversation about understanding investing in real estate, these 15 steps, literally a world-class program. I don't even know how many hours. I think it's like 70 hours of learning in that. But it's myself and JG are delivering it. We're looking into the camera and delivering it. There's handouts and downloads and all sorts of stuff.
Like I said, I've been not only have I been part of some of your guys' banter with each other, but I've seen a lot of stuff, and I'm telling everybody, all my whole community, go to Rain. They've made it like how you made it super, super affordable. Like, I don't know how you guys figured that out. You guys have. It's not expensive whatsoever for the amount of knowledge, I mean, that you're going to be able to get, but also the possible connections that you're going to be able to make.
Yeah.
Patrick, I said it at the start, brother. I am so thankful for you to have stopped by today.
It's fun.
Like we didn't do the virtual thing. Not that there was anything going to be wrong with it, but we really got to do this.
I wanted to be in this cool studio.
So I appreciate
it's
that,
all
man.
about it, man.
Yeah, like we just put this thing together about a little less than a year ago, and so it's all coming together. And so thank you for gracing the couch, and thank you for all the knowledge you put out there, and just like how free you are with the information. And again, I'm lucky to call you a friend. I appreciate your time, and thank you for being here today, brother.
Thanks, Ben. Loved it.
I'll give you one of these. There you go.